City, all the studies have shown that 33% of black, 33% of white, and 33% of Hispanics use marijuana. But the big number and the monkey in the room is that 90% of arrests are black and brown. So when they look at numbers, the numbers don't work. It's nowhere in the world we could all be smoking on the same level, but the only people that go in the jail are black and brown.
So the numbers they're not matching up. There's something going wrong. So it looked like targeted enforcement was being used in the black and brown communities. And, once you arrest somebody, they lose their job. If they're the breadwinner, they could lose their house. Family, get disconnected. There's a lot of things that happen when you're like, and you're talking about a dime bag of weed? Like, what are we talking about? Come on, we got bigger fish to fry.
There needs to be a segue into legalization. We can write bills and have them signed by the governor and turn them into law, but I would rather that not happen before we take the proper preparations to do that. When black and brown people are still in jail for years and years and years, but white people come in and capitalize on it while those people are still in jail for the same thing that other people are being praised as like business tycoons for, it doesn't make sense. And that's why it's all about sensible drug policy.
I think we should legalize marijuana, and I think we should do it in a way that corrects the wrongs of society. We've had a history of incarcerating black and Latino youths for decades for things that white people get away with. So we have a discriminatory impact on the law. In 1977, the state legislature decriminalized personal use marijuana for low amounts. Even though that was law, we still see ongoing prejudicial enforcement, which is really mostly affecting communities of color throughout the country and throughout the state.
Actually, America's worst war that we've ever fought was a war on drugs, because drugs are still here, people are still taking them, and the police has had no effect. The only thing we did was lock people up. And who am I to tell you what to put in your body? And that's just really, when you really take a look at it, I can't regulate what you. If you want to smoke weed, you want to sniff cocaine, you want to shoot dope. So America needs to shift to counseling, helping. Drugs is actually a health issue. It's not a police issue. And that's what the police have a problem with.
They've tracked the approximate use of drugs, about 10 to 20% of people consistently use drugs. And the spending has gone exponentially up into the billions and billions of dollars, but it hasn't affected the usage rates. It's basically a flat line. So in keeping drugs off the street and violence surrounding the drug war out of the country, it has not worked.
One of the models for things like depression or substance use is this disconnection that people feel with the lives that they're supposed to lead, the lives that they lead, where they may just encounter lots of stress, people shutting them out, and so they turn to drugs as a way to deal with their loneliness. And I definitely felt that way. I would say that my alcohol and marijuana use, when I first discovered them, was a lot like those other people, where I was using it as a way to just forget about my personal problems.
When I first told my family, I wanted to get involved in legal cannabis, they kind of gave me this very blank stare of, okay, are you trying to put a target on your back? And, trying to have a realistic conversation with them about how this could be something that could be a boon to our economic, statushood. So now it's just that my great aunt comes in here every other week for CBD salve, for Ojai tincture with has moringa oil in it, because she's starting to see the cultural correlations. The entire team is very invigorated in being able to talk about this and not feel stigmatized or brandished as just drug dealers. We're people who want people to understand this.
There's a bill that's in the Assembly. The prime sponsor is Assemblywoman People-Stokes in the Assembly, and the Senate and Senator Kruger. I'm a co-sponsor of that legislation called the MRTA. And it does exactly that. It tries to address the historical discrimination and talks about how we right the wrongs of our society.
I'm from Long Island, Nassau and Suffolk counties, and both of those counties have already said that should we legalize recreational use marijuana, that they will opt out. Quite honestly, I think if it becomes law, they'd be foolish to opt out because then they lose the tax revenue and their constituents will still legally be able to smoke. And you run into, the health and safety issues like, if you're driving drunk, there's a test for it. If you're driving high, there's no test for it. And what, that they say the chronic smokers that, it's less of a problem. But I worry about that guy. All of a sudden it's legal. He goes, gets a chocolate bar, and, you're supposed to take one corner. And he says, damn, that tastes good. 1/4, yeah, but 5 minutes later, I don't feel it yet. If 1/4 is good, maybe I should eat the whole damn bar. And now he's driving down the street, and it kicks in, and he is stoned. She is stoned. And they kill my mother driving down the road. Or my sister walking across the street. Mm-hmm. So, and there's no way to tell.
Well, New York, the finger's on the pulse. Governor Cuomo is right there. They're about to legalize it. I truly believe it's going to be legalized very soon. But there is some pushback. I just testified at a community group in Long Island, New York, and man, it was a raucous meeting. That's just for medical marijuana. It was bad. So it has its pros and cons.
So would you vote for a bill?
Right now, I'd have a problem with it.
Okay. Because?
Yeah, I would have a problem with it because as I said, I think it should be issues like this that are so divisive and will fundamentally change the way New York works. Mm-hmm. I think the voters certainly should have a say in that process. That being said, if every other state goes that way, then I would probably go along with that. I would probably support decriminalization.
So Governor Cuomo was never for legalizing recreational marijuana, and in fact, he puts up many barriers to the things he doesn't want to see changed in the law until it's opportunistic for him to get reelected on those issues. So now he's acting as if he were the champion of marijuana legalization because he's letting it happen and supporting it only now when he has to. Oftentimes in New York politics, we see officials claim that marijuana is a gateway drug when the reality is that it's an exit drug for a lot of people.
I grew up in a fairly conservative household. My parents are Muslim, and I didn't use any drugs at all until I got to college. And for me, I guess you could say that alcohol was a sort of gateway for me, in the sense that I had now glimpsed into this area of my life, which was altering my consciousness. That was the first time I had experienced it. So after that, it was sort of open the floodgates to what other things I could experience. And so for me, that was balancing all the new experience I had was something that really transformed my outlook on life. And there are definitely times when I felt like I was using substances to push down feelings of loneliness or disconnection that I felt.
Friends of mine have misused drugs and they've developed what we call substance use disorders, which is the new progressive way of saying addiction. It's less stigmatizing because they're people first. They're not just defined by their addiction. And I've had friends who have overdosed and died.
It used to be me hearing these stories of other families, right? Someone was about to die because they had cancer, and so our family was we'll try anything. And I just think that's sad that we've heard this so many times from other people, mm-hmm. and we haven't said as a society this is enough. We don't need death to be the reason why we're let me let my guard down and think about this a little more on my own.
The governor a year ago was against legalization, so he's changed his mind. I think there's been a large sea change in the public's views around legalization. We've seen some states legalize cannabis for adult use. There's some, I think there's some real problems that was rolled out in places like, in Boston or in Colorado where we haven't seen restorative justice pieces of legislation that we want to see in New York. So we want to make sure that we put the time and energy into it, because whatever we do now is going to affect generations to come. No matter what we do to legalize it, will have a long-lasting impact. So if we do it poorly, and we don't deal with the restorative justice pieces, we'll never have restorative justice that we need.
And my mom came out, she surprised me, she visited the store. And there's the conversation that's happening is not like, you know, how much weed can you smoke? How much weed can we smoke all day? It's helping people. It's asking them what they've heard about CBD and what got them intrigued, and then walking them through the steps so they can understand how they can experiment with it.
I believe we have the votes in the Assembly and the Senate to pass them. I think the governor, since he put legalization of cannabis in his budget in a separate bill, in a separate idea, I think if all three bodies are moving forward in the same direction, we can get it passed. But it really matters what we pass, because if we do it poorly, we can see that we will not deal with the historical discrimination issue. We will just allow cannabis to be taken over by private equity money, and to ensure that it becomes like big tobacco or big pharma, where big drug companies are reaping millions of dollars off the communities who should benefit from legalization. So it's not just we have to pass something, we have to pass the right thing, and that's what we're fighting to do.
You know, I have family members that smoke, I have friends that smoke, you know. And they're all under the guise of, I might get locked up, so you gotta do it in the house. You gotta do it in your backyard. If you wanna smoke a marijuana cigarette walking down the block, why not?